If there is one thing every employee fears more than a sudden meeting, it's an unexpected memo from the CEO with their name on it. And that's exactly how my Monday morning began, before coffee, before routine, before I even fully woke up. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, vibrating so aggressively that it almost fell off. I thought it was another notification, or one of those company-wide reminders about quarterly reports. But when I saw the sender's name, CEO Alexander Grant, I sat up straight. I was wide awake instantly, pulse racing, eyes trying to make sense of the subject line flashing in bold, board retreat attendance, immediate action required. At first, I thought it might be a general notice sent to everyone in leadership, maybe a simple reminder to confirm reservations or update schedules. But the moment I opened the email, my stomach dropped. This wasn't a reminder. It wasn't even a group memo. It was addressed directly to me. And the message was painfully short, almost cold enough to frost the screen. Do not attend the board retreat. This instruction is final. Nothing else. No explanation. No courtesy. No signature. Just those words, floating in white space like a threat. For a moment, I wondered if I had read it wrong. Maybe the CEO meant something else. Maybe it was a mistake. But the more I stared at it, the more the words burned into my mind. Do not attend. Not recommended. Not suggested. Absolutely forbidden. And the final line, this instruction is final, made it feel like an order I wasn't supposed to question. But it didn't sit right with me. I had worked at the company for 7 years. I had climbed from a junior analyst to the position of director of operations. I had been invited to every major event, retreat, and strategy meeting since my second promotion. The board retreat wasn't optional. It was mandatory for directors and essential for those of us responsible for key departments. So why was I suddenly told to stay away? Why now? And why in a tone that felt more personal than professional? I sat on the edge of my bed, the soft hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence as I tried to gather my thoughts. The retreat was only 2 days away. Hotel arrangements had already been made, sessions scheduled, presentations finalized. I was supposed to deliver a report on operational restructuring, something the CEO himself previously insisted I prepare. So what changed overnight? I typed back a simple response, one that didn't show panic or confusion or the frustration building in my chest. Just one word that felt safe. Understood. I hit send. But the moment I did, I wished I hadn't. Something about my own reply made me uneasy, like I had agreed to something without actually knowing what it was. As I got ready for work, the memo replayed over and over in my mind. Every possibility crossed my thoughts. Had I messed up a report? Had someone complained about me? Was the CEO replacing me? Downsizing my department? Or worse, was the company itself facing some internal conflict I wasn't aware of? By the time I reached the office, I felt as if everyone was staring at me, though deep down I knew they weren't. They were too busy, too consumed with their screens and morning tasks. But paranoia has a way of making normal things feel suspicious. Even small conversations at the coffee machine sounded like whispers. Even the sound of laughter from the marketing team felt like it was aimed at me. I tried to shake it off. The first person I met on the operations floor was Laura, my team lead and the closest thing I had to a friend in the building. She looked up from her screen when she saw me, eyebrows raised. "You look tense," she said. "Rough morning." "You have no idea," I replied. She leaned in, lowering her voice slightly. "Don't tell me it's about the retreat. Everyone's talking about it already." That sentence froze me. Talking about what? "I mean, you know." She hesitated, like she was afraid of saying something wrong. "The guest list. There were last-minute changes." My heart thumped, loud enough that I felt it in my throat. Last-minute changes? Like what? She shrugged. "Some directors aren't attending. Some invites were withdrawn. Apparently the CEO made the call personally. I don't know why." I forced a smile, but inside my mind spiraled. So it wasn't just me. The CEO was cutting people from the retreat, quietly, secretly, suddenly, and no one knew the reason. Throughout the day, I couldn't focus on anything. My eyes skimmed through spreadsheets, but my mind kept going back to the same question. Why was I being excluded? The retreat was where major decisions were made, budget approvals, upcoming projects, departmental performance reviews, promotions. For someone in my position, Missing that event could stall my career, maybe even jeopardize my role. It felt like being asked to step out of a room right before important conversations happened. Around noon, I stepped into the elevator to head down to the cafeteria, but as the doors closed, I heard a voice call out, "Hold the door." Instinctively, I pressed the button, and the door slid open. Standing there was Nathan, the company's senior finance manager, someone known for being sharp, quiet, and almost impossible to read. He rarely spoke unless necessary. But today, his eyes looked different. Cautious, as if he was carrying a secret. He stepped in, and the doors closed again. The elevator hummed softly as we descended. After a few seconds of silence, he asked without looking at me, "Did you get a memo this morning?" My breath caught slightly. "What memo?" He finally turned his head, and his expression told me he already knew the answer. The one about the retreat. It wasn't a question. It was confirmation. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. "I got one too," he said quietly, almost whispering, even though no one else was in the elevator. And 2 of the senior analysts in my department did as well. My eyebrows drew together. Why would the CEO tell us not to go? Nathan exhaled slowly. "That's the thing. I don't think it's about us. I think something is happening. Something big." Before I could ask what he meant, the elevator dinged, and the doors opened onto the lobby. Employees walked past us, carrying coffee cups, chatting casually, unaware of the tension sitting heavily between us. "Whatever is going on," Nathan said before walking away, "just be careful." His words sank into me like a warning I didn't know how to process. The rest of the day felt heavier. Every passing glance from other employees felt meaningful. Every email notification made me jump slightly, and every whisper in the hallway made me wonder if people were talking about the same memo. By late afternoon, I decided I needed clarity. I couldn't keep spiraling in my own thoughts, so I walked straight to the executive floor. The receptionist looked up, smiling politely. "How can I help you?" "I need to speak with CEO Grant," I said. She blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but—" "I'm sorry," she cut in gently. "He's unavailable all day. He's in back-to-back sessions. Can you at least let him know I stopped by?" "I can try," she said. "But he instructed us not to disturb him unless it's urgent." I swallowed hard. "This is urgent." She gave me a slow nod, but her eyes told me not to expect much. I thanked her and left, my mind racing with more questions than answers. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But every instinct inside me insisted it was far more complicated. By the time I reached home that evening, exhaustion pulled at every muscle. I threw my bag on the couch and sank into the cushions, rubbing my forehead. The silence of the apartment wrapped around me, offering a moment to breathe. But that moment didn't last long. My phone vibrated again. A new email. From CEO Alexander Grant. Subject: Follow-up instructions. Message: We will discuss your role soon. Until then, do not share this memo with anyone. My chest tightened. My heart beat faster. He knew. Somehow, he knew people were talking. He knew employees had compared notes. And the message sounded far too specific, far too pointed. Like it wasn't just a general warning, like it was directed at me personally. But the final sentence, the one that made my stomach twist, "We will discuss your role soon," that line sat in my mind like a storm cloud threatening to break open. I stared at the screen, unsure whether I should reply, ignore it, or pack a suitcase and pretend none of it existed. But before I could think of anything, my phone buzzed again. Except this time, it wasn't an email. It was a text message from an unknown number. Only 3 words. "He's hiding something." I froze. My room felt colder. And before I could even process that message, another one came through. "Whatever you do, don't trust him." My breath caught. Because if the CEO was hiding something, and people were being quietly removed from the board retreat, then what exactly was waiting for the ones who were attending? And more importantly, what was supposed to happen that he didn't want me to see? Before I could type a reply, another message popped up. This time longer, more direct, and far more chilling. "If you want answers, check the folder he keeps in his private office. Top drawer. It's about the retreat." I stared at the screen, my heartbeat pounding loud enough for me to hear it in my ears. I didn't know who sent the message. I didn't know how they got my number. And I definitely didn't know how they knew about the memo. But one thing was suddenly very clear. Whatever was happening inside the company, whatever secret the CEO was hiding, whatever was planned for that retreat, it was bigger than a memo, bigger than a simple exclusion, bigger than anything I had imagined. And if I was going to find out the truth, I would have to decide by tomorrow morning whether to follow the warning or walk straight into whatever danger the CEO was trying to keep me away from. Because something was brewing behind closed doors, something the CEO didn't want me to witness, something that could change everything. And by the next sunrise, I would have no choice but to face it, whether I was ready or not. The messages from the unknown number stayed on my screen long after I had stopped reading them. I held the phone like it was something fragile, something dangerous, something that could shatter my whole life if I pressed the wrong button. The room felt too quiet, too still, like the walls themselves were waiting for what I would do next. I kept staring at the last text, about the folder in the CEO's private office, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I had never stepped foot in Alexander Grant's personal office. No one did unless they were invited. It wasn't just a workspace. It was practically off-limits territory. Even senior staff joked about it being the vault, where secrets lived. But now someone was telling me to go inside. I placed my phone face down on the couch and tried to breathe slowly. I needed to think. I needed to understand how I even got here. One morning memo, and suddenly my whole career felt like it was balancing on a thin wire. But to understand the meaning behind that memo, I realized I needed to step back and look at everything that had led me to this point. When I first joined the company, it wasn't the giant powerhouse it is now. It was small, ambitious, still trying to find footing in an overcrowded industry. Alexander Grant had taken over as CEO just a year before I joined, and people talked about him like he was a miracle worker. The man had confidence that filled every room he walked into. Not arrogant, but powerful. Sharp. Efficient. The kind of leader people followed instinctively. I admired him, honestly. Most of us did. He revived dying branches, cut inefficiencies, rebuilt entire departments, and somehow still made the company feel innovative. I worked hard because I wanted to be part of that growth. I wanted to contribute to something that mattered. For years, things made sense. Promotions came. Responsibilities grew. And Grant always seemed to remember the people who worked the hardest. He didn't speak to me often, but when he did, his words felt deliberate. He had a way of making someone feel seen, even in a short conversation. That's why the memo he sent this morning felt so personal, so strange. It didn't match the leader I thought I knew. But then again, people change. Companies change. Power changes everything, sometimes quietly, sometimes in ways you don't notice until it's too late. As I sat in my apartment, the city lights flickering through the curtains, I kept thinking of Nathan's warning in the elevator. Something big is happening. He said it like someone who knew more than he could say out loud. And the fact that he got the same memo, that shifted everything. It meant whatever was happening wasn't random. It wasn't about personal performance or job titles. It was targeted, selective, purposeful. I replayed the day in my head, the cautious looks, the whispered conversations, the anxious energy running through the office like electricity. People were nervous, even if they weren't saying it openly. Something had started long before the memo reached us. I picked up my phone again, scrolling back to the text messages. The unknown number still sat there, no profile picture, no hint of who it might be. For a moment, I thought about calling it. But something inside me said that was a terrible idea. If someone knew enough to warn me, they also knew enough to stay anonymous. I stood up and walked to the window, watching cars move along the street below. It made me think of the first time I saw Grant up close. It was 5 years ago, in a conference room filled with too many people and too much ambition. He stepped in late, apologized briefly, and in the next 30 minutes broke down a failing quarter into a recovery plan with such precision I actually forgot to take notes. That was the moment I realized people like him didn't just run companies, they studied every moving piece, every weakness, every potential threat. So if a man like that told me not to attend the board retreat, I had to assume it wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. I walked back to the couch and sat, letting that thought sink deeper. Maybe this wasn't about me being excluded. Maybe this was about me being kept away. Which only raised another question, a heavier one. Kept away from what? There were rumors, of course. There always are in companies this size. Some said the board retreat wasn't just a retreat this year, it was a decision-making point for something huge. A restructure. A merger. A deal no one could talk about. I had heard whispers in hallway conversations, hints from colleagues who knew someone on the financial team or the legal side. Nothing concrete. Nothing official. But the timing felt too precise to ignore. If a major decision was going to be made, one that could shift departments, roles, maybe even replace directors, it made sense why certain people would be told to stay away. But then why the secrecy? Why a private memo? Why warnings? And if it really was about restructuring, why would someone anonymously text me that the CEO was hiding something? I leaned back against the couch and closed my eyes for a moment. My mind drifted to the board retreat itself. It wasn't just a casual event at a nice resort. It was where everything important happened behind closed doors. Presentations, debates, strategic directions, the kind of decisions that determine careers. 2 years ago, I attended my first one. It was intimidating at first, the luxury, the security, the strict schedules, but I learned quickly that the retreat wasn't about relaxing. It was about aligning power. The board spoke freely there in ways they never did in the office. People formed alliances. Some proposals got pushed through. Some sunk without a trace. It was where influence quietly moved around the table. Missing that retreat wasn't no big deal. It was a message. It meant something was shifting, and I was being pushed out of the room where it was happening. I opened my eyes. The quiet seemed heavier now. The city outside continued moving, unaware of the web tightening around me. I picked up my phone again, this time scrolling through old messages, trying to see if the CEO had ever hinted at anything unusual. Nothing stood out. Everything felt normal, professional, predictable. Until now. Just as I was about to put the phone down again, another notification appeared. For a second, my breath hitched. But it wasn't from the unknown number. It was from Laura. Hey, strange question, but did you get dropped from the retreat too? A few people are whispering things. Call me if you're awake. I stared at the message, feeling my pulse rise again. If Laura had heard, then the situation was spreading faster than I thought. That wasn't good. Rumors were unpredictable. They twisted facts. They exposed secrets. And in a company like ours, rumors were the worst kind of spark. You never knew when one would turn into a fire. But I didn't call her. Not yet. Not until I knew what I was actually dealing with. I set the phone aside again and walked toward the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water. My reflection in the microwave door looked tired, worried, but determined. I didn't like being kept in the dark, and I definitely didn't like the idea of being blindsided at work. But the more I thought about it, the more one thing became clear. If I wanted the truth, I had to go to the source. I had to see whatever was inside that folder. The thought alone made my chest tighten. Breaking into a CEO's private office, even after hours, wasn't simple. It wasn't something anyone could do without consequences. Cameras, keycard logs, late-night staff, everything was a risk. But the unknown message didn't feel like a prank, and the memo didn't feel ordinary. I walked back into the living room, pacing slowly. Maybe the person texting me worked inside the company. Maybe they were one of the people cut from the retreat. Maybe they overheard something they weren't supposed to. Or maybe they were close to the CEO, close enough to see something dangerous. Whoever they were, they wanted me to know something. Something hidden. Something the CEO didn't want any of us to find out. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each second reminding me that the retreat was approaching fast. Once the board gathered, once decisions were made, once the doors closed, it would be too late. I stopped pacing and looked at my phone one more time. The unknown number hadn't messaged again. But the silence felt just as loud. I knew what I had to do next. I knew the choice was already made the moment the memo hit my inbox. Tomorrow, I was going back to the office. And before the day ended, I was getting into that private office. Because if the CEO was hiding something, if this retreat held more than corporate strategy, if certain people were being quietly pushed aside, I needed to know why. And the closer I got to the truth, the more certain I became of one thing. Whatever was inside that folder wasn't just information. It was a warning. And the moment I opened it, everything in my life might change. By the next morning, I was already awake before my alarm rang. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to steady my breathing. I knew what I was planning wasn't just risky, it could cost me everything. But every time I replayed the memo, the anonymous text, the strange whispers in the office, the uneasiness returned stronger than before. Whatever truth was hidden in Grant's private office had already wrapped itself around my mind. I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. The office building felt different when I arrived. There was a quietness in the air that didn't match the usual morning buzz. People walked a little faster. Conversations were shorter. I shifted more than usual. It was as if everyone knew something was happening but didn't know how to talk about it. As I walked to my department, I spotted Laura near the break room. She waved me over with a concerned look. "You didn't call last night," she said, arms crossed. "I was worried." "I know," I replied gently. "Sorry. I just needed to think." She studied my face, picking up immediately that something was off. "This retreat thing," she whispered. "I heard 4 more people were told not to attend. One of them is from legal. That's not normal." A chill ran down my back. "Legal? Are you sure?" She nodded. "I heard it from someone who works directly with them. And they looked scared." Scared was becoming a familiar word in this story. Before I could ask more, someone from HR passed by, glancing at us a little longer than necessary. Laura lowered her voice further. "Whatever's going on, be careful. Stay under the radar." I forced a reassuring smile I didn't feel. "I will." But staying under the radar wasn't an option anymore. Not with everything pointing toward something hidden. I made my way to my office and sat down, pretending to work while my mind sorted through every possible scenario. If legal was being cut from the retreat, that meant the board would be discussing something that needed fewer eyes, fewer voices, fewer witnesses. A merger? A mass restructuring? A deal that couldn't be questioned? Or something far more dangerous? Just as I began drafting a fake performance report to cover my lack of focus, an email notification popped up. It was from Nathan. "We need to talk." "Not here." 2 p.m. parking level 3. My heartbeat quickened. Parking level 3 wasn't busy during work hours. That meant privacy. That meant secrecy. And that meant another piece of whatever puzzle we were trapped in was about to reveal itself. But before that meeting, I still had one more thing to do. I needed to figure out how to access the executive floor unnoticed. In the early afternoon, I left my office and took the stairs instead of the elevator. The executive floor was on level 15, tucked behind a restricted access hallway. I'd only been there twice, both times escorted. I paused a few steps away, checking the hallway carefully. Cameras. One near the elevator. One above the entrance. One angled toward the far wall. I pretended to walk past casually, observing the blind spots and timing of the rotating camera. I didn't need to break in now. I needed to understand how. Because whatever conversation Nathan wanted to have at 2 p.m. might decide whether entering that office was worth the risk, or if I should turn around before I crossed a line I couldn't return from. When I finally headed to the parking garage, the air felt heavier than usual. The lights flickered faintly overhead, and the sound of distant footsteps echoed like warnings. Nathan stood near a concrete pillar, hands in his pockets, looking more tense than I had ever seen him. "You came," he said softly. "Of course. What's going on?" He exhaled, glancing around before speaking again. "I talked to someone this morning. Someone from internal audit. Internal audit. A department known for digging quietly, observing quietly, revealing quietly. Not a place rumors came from lightly." "What did they say?" I asked. Nathan hesitated, eyes scanning the garage like he expected someone to jump out. "They think the retreat isn't just a retreat. They think the board is voting on a confidential acquisition. Something massive. Acquisition." I repeated. "Yes. But here's the thing. Internal audit wasn't asked to review any documentation. Legal wasn't asked to prepare contracts. Finance wasn't asked to run projections. It's like the CEO cut out every department that would normally oversee something like this." I felt a tension rise inside my chest. "Why would he do that?" "That's what worries everyone," Nathan said. "Acquisitions that bypass oversight usually mean one of 2 things. Either it's extremely time-sensitive, or it's not something the company would approve if everyone saw the details. My mind raced. So he's only letting certain board members attend. People who'll agree without questioning. Exactly, Nathan whispered. The idea hit me harder than I expected. A CEO pushing a secret acquisition through without standard checks. That wasn't just unusual. It was dangerous, illegal in some cases, and career-ending for anyone caught near it. But then Nathan added something that made everything feel even worse. The internal auditor told me something else. The ones being removed from the retreat? They're all people who've questioned decisions recently, or people the CEO sees as obstacles. My breathing slowed. My vision sharpened. So we were excluded because we get in the way. Nathan nodded. You've been vocal about transparency. I've questioned finances more than once. Legal pushback on a few projects. Pieces started snapping together. And the board retreat, Nathan continued, is the perfect place to finalize something before anyone else finds out. My hands felt cold. Then why warn us? Why send those anonymous messages? Maybe someone inside doesn't agree with what's happening, he said. Or maybe they're scared too. I leaned against the pillar, trying to comprehend the scale of it. A secret acquisition. A CEO filtering out witnesses. Employees being told to stay away. Someone anonymously guiding me toward evidence in his private office. The main conflict was no longer just a strange memo. It was a power play. A dangerous move happening at the highest level. One that could affect hundreds of employees, maybe more. And now I was tangled in the middle of it. Before I could respond, Nathan glanced sharply toward the entrance as footsteps echoed. A pair of employees walked past us, deep in conversation, not paying attention. But both of us stayed quiet until their voices disappeared. We need to be smart, he whispered. Whatever you do, don't make sudden moves. Don't ask questions. Don't confront anyone. But the look in his eyes told me something else entirely. He was scared for me. And he was scared for himself too. I nodded slowly. I understand. But deep inside, I knew the situation was reaching a point where staying quiet wouldn't save any of us. As we parted ways, the tension in the air felt sharper. More real. Every sound, every shadow, every glance from passing employees carried a new weight. I knew what I had to do now. And I knew the risk. But the truth was waiting. Behind a locked office door. Inside a folder in the top drawer. A folder the CEO never wanted me to see. And the closer I got to uncovering that truth, the more I could feel it. This wasn't just a corporate secret. It was a turning point. Something that would change everything once the full story came to light. And the real conflict had only just begun. By the time I returned to my floor, my heartbeat still hadn't slowed. Every hallway suddenly felt narrower. Every open door felt like an eye watching me. I kept replaying everything Nathan had said about the acquisition, the missing oversight, the selective invitations. It painted a picture I didn't want to believe, but couldn't ignore. And underneath it all was the same thought circling my mind like a warning siren. The CEO wasn't just excluding us. He was removing obstacles. I sat at my desk and pretended to work, though I didn't absorb a single word on my screen. My mind stayed locked on one thing, the folder in Grant's private office. If the retreat was where the plan would be finalized, then whatever was in that drawer had to be the missing link. Something important enough to hide. Something dangerous enough to protect. And whoever messaged me clearly believed I needed to see it before the board left for the retreat. I glanced around the room. People were focused on their work, but the tension was there, like everyone could sense something shifting beneath the surface. An atmosphere like this didn't happen without reason. A little after noon, I stood up and walked toward the hallway, trying to look as normal as possible. My palms were sweaty. My chest felt tight. But I kept my pace steady. If anything looked suspicious, even a single camera angle, everything would fall apart before it even started. I headed to the stairwell, closing the door softly behind me. The stairwell always smelled faintly of concrete and dust, echoing each step lightly. I climbed slowly, my mind rehearsing the plan again and again. I timed the cameras earlier. I knew roughly when the hallway would be quiet. And I also knew the CEO had an off-site meeting scheduled for the next 2 hours. One of the executive assistants had mentioned it in passing this morning. That was the window. My only window. When I reached the 15th floor, I paused, ear against the stairwell door. Silence. No footsteps. No talk. No clicking of heels. I slowly cracked the door open and peeked through. The hallway was empty. I stepped out, adrenaline rushing through my veins. The lights on this floor were softer, warmer, creating long shadows against the walls. The framed photos of company milestones looked dimmer here, nearly watching me as I walked past them. Grant's private office sat at the far end of the hallway, frosted glass, dark wood frame, the company logo etched near the top. I'd seen that door only twice in the 7 years I'd been here. And now I was about to open it uninvited. My hand hovered over the handle. For a moment, I hesitated. If someone saw me, if I tripped the wrong sensor, if the CEO returned earlier than expected, my career wouldn't just end. I could face serious trouble. But backing out now didn't feel like an option. Too much had happened. Too much was at stake. I turned the handle slowly. To my surprise, the door clicked open with almost no resistance. I slipped inside. Grant's office was colder than I expected. Minimalist, polished, spotless. A wide desk set near the window, facing the skyline. Not a single paper was out of place. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something metallic. My eyes scanned the room quickly, but every second felt like it stretched. I walked to the desk, heart pounding harder with each step. The top drawer he always kept locked was on the right side. I pulled gently. Locked. Of course. For a moment, panic hit me. But then I crouched down and looked closer at the lock. It wasn't a traditional lock, it was a digital one. One with a small card reader. And suddenly the warning from the unknown number made more sense. They knew how his office worked. They knew what drawer the folder was in. And they likely knew something else too. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my company ID card, pulse racing faster. I slid it over the sensor. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a soft beep. The drawer clicked. My breath caught. I slowly pulled it open. Inside, there was only one item. One thick folder labeled, Restructure, Confidential Board Use Only. Just seeing it made my stomach twist. I pulled the folder out, hands trembling. I was about to open it when a faint sound reached my ears. Footsteps. Coming down the hallway. My chest tightened instantly. I shoved the folder under my arm and closed the drawer carefully, praying the lock reset automatically. The footsteps grew louder, steady, slow, approaching the office. My hands felt numb. I stepped away from the desk and scanned the room. Hiding wasn't an option. And if I got caught with the folder in my hands, there'd be no explanation that could save me. The footsteps were right outside now. My only chance was to leave before whoever it was entered. I grabbed the office handle quietly and waited, timing the footsteps. They paused, right in front of the door. My heart thudded, so loudly I was sure whoever was outside could hear it. Then the footsteps moved again. Away! I slowly opened the door and slipped into the hallway, careful not to make a sound. I walked calmly, too calmly, and rounded the corner just as another figure emerged from the elevator. My blood ran cold. It was the CEO's assistant, and she was heading straight toward the office. I forced myself not to look back as I walked away, each step stiff and deliberate. I didn't breathe until I reached the stairwell again and shut the door behind me. Only then did I lean against the wall, hands shaking as I looked down at the folder pressed against my side. I didn't open it yet. I couldn't, not here. Not while the risk was this high. I climbed down to my floor and slipped into my office like nothing had happened. The folder felt heavy in my hands, heavier than anything I had ever held. I placed it gently inside my bag, covering it with a sweater. Just as I sat down, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Only 4 words this time. Do not open it. My breath hitched. Why send me to get the folder? But then warn me not to open it? Was it a trap? A test? A way to expose who was curious? Before I could even process that, another message appeared. He's watching now. Cold ran through me. I lifted my eyes slowly and saw someone on the floor I hadn't noticed earlier. A man in a suit standing near the corner offices, talking quietly to HR. His eyes flicked toward me for a moment. Too sharp, too aware. He didn't look like an employee I recognized. He didn't even look like someone who belonged here. I looked back down at my phone as another message came through. Act normal. You're not safe yet. I swallowed hard and forced myself to turn back to my computer, hands trembling on the keyboard. Whoever was texting me wasn't just guessing what was happening. They were seeing it, as it was happening. And that meant one terrifying thing. Someone inside the company was keeping an eye on both me and the CEO. And the closer I came to the truth, the more dangerous everything was becoming. The board retreat was tomorrow. The CEO was watching. Someone else was watching him. And I had a folder in my bag that could destroy everything. The tension kept climbing, tightening, closing in. And I knew the next step I took would push the story to its breaking point. The climax was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. The air in the hallway felt heavier than before, like the walls themselves had heard the conversation and were waiting for what would come next. I walked away from the security office, the words from the guard echoing in my mind. If your name was removed, someone did it manually. That sentence looped in my head over and over, each repetition tightening something inside me. I kept thinking about who would go out of their way to delete my name, and why they'd want me out of the board retreat so badly. The retreat wasn't even supposed to be dramatic. It was meant to be a strategy weekend, a place where executives pitched ideas and argued over budgets. But somehow this was turning into something else, something bigger, something personal. As I reached the elevator lobby, I noticed my reflection in the shiny metal doors. I looked more tired than I realized. My face carried the expression of someone trying to hold everything together while sensing that the ground beneath them was shifting. The elevator door slid open, and as I stepped inside, I replayed the last few weeks in my mind like I was trying to find the moment everything started going wrong. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, quiet, almost hidden. My CEO's behavior had changed, not enough for others to point it out, but enough for me to feel it. The short answers, the unread messages, the memo telling me not to attend the retreat. Something had shifted long before today, and I hadn't seen it clearly. The elevator doors closed, and I found myself staring at the floor number counting down. I thought about the board members. Some of them were distant, some barely acknowledged me, but others respected my work. One of them, Daniel, had even told me last month that my proposal for restructuring our international operations might be the strongest idea the company had seen in years. If that was true, then why would the CEO suddenly want me away from the retreat, the very place where that proposal would be presented, debated, and possibly approved? The more I thought about it, the more it felt strategic. Removing me from the room meant removing my voice, my impact, my chance to argue for the plan I had spent months building. The elevator dinged softly, and I stepped out into the underground parking lot. It was quiet, with only the hum of ventilation echoing through the concrete walls. My footsteps sounded louder than usual, each one carrying a sense of urgency. As I approached my car, I paused. There was something on the windshield, something that wasn't there when I parked earlier. A white envelope, held in place by the wiper. My throat tightened for a moment as I reached out and picked it up. No name on it. No logo. Just a plain envelope. I slipped into the driver's seat and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper with typed text. Just one sentence. You need to rethink who you trust. That was it. No signature. No explanation. No clue. My heartbeat quickened as I stared at it. The clean, printed font made it feel even colder. Someone had gone to the trouble of printing this, placing it on my car, and making sure I would find it before I left. I leaned back in the seat, letting the silence settle around me. Was this a warning? A threat? A hint? And why now? Why today of all days? I sat there for a long moment, trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced through names, people who might know something, people who might have overheard something, people who might be involved. And as much as I hated to admit it, my CEO's name kept rising to the top of that list. Not because I wanted it to, but because everything kept pointing back to him. The memo, the missing badge entry, the sudden shift in behavior, and now this anonymous warning. But there was someone else I couldn't ignore, the board's vice chair, Laura. She had always been very measured, very sharp, very aware of how company politics worked. She rarely showed what she was thinking, but she noticed everything. She and the CEO had been at odds over the company's direction for over a year, and I had seen them debate in subtle, careful ways that felt like chess moves rather than disagreements. As I drove out of the parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening was bigger than a memo or a retreat. It felt coordinated, planned, like a series of steps someone wanted me to follow or avoid. The city outside was busy, but it all felt distant. My thoughts were louder than the traffic, louder than the noise of people crossing streets and talking on phones. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. A notification. I glanced at the screen. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a message. It was an email alert. The sender was blocked, hidden behind a generic privacy filter. But the subject line made my fingers freeze around the steering wheel. He's not who you think he is. I pulled over to the side of the road and opened the email. Inside was just a single attachment, a photo. It took a second to load, but when it did, my eyes widened. The picture showed the CEO standing at a restaurant table with two people from our competitor's company, executives I recognized instantly. Their faces were clear, their expressions serious, and the timestamp on the photo was from 3 nights ago. And our CEO wasn't just shaking hands. He was passing them a folder. I stared at it in disbelief. The CEO meeting with them wasn't just unusual. It was dangerous. It had legal implications, ethical complications, board-level consequences. And here I was, being told not to attend the retreat, being locked out of the building, receiving warnings from anonymous sources. My breathing went shallow as I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. This wasn't about me being excluded. This was about me being kept out of the way. The retreat suddenly felt like a stage where something bigger was planned, something I wasn't supposed to witness, something I wasn't supposed to interfere with. The CEO wasn't trying to punish me. He was trying to silence me. If my proposal threatened whatever secret meeting he was having with a competitor, then removing me from the retreat was a strategic move. But the more frightening thought wasn't the meeting itself. It was the possibility that other board members might already know. Maybe some were involved. Maybe some were being kept in the dark, just like me. And if someone was willing to go this far, who knew what the next step might be? I looked at the photo again, zooming in just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. But the details were clear, undeniable, impossible to misinterpret. And as I sat there with the engine running and the city moving around me, I felt a chill settle in my chest. Someone had dragged me into a game I never asked to play. Someone didn't want me to make it to that retreat. And now, someone else wanted me to uncover the truth. The only question left was who would reach me first and what it would cost. The drive to the retreat felt longer than it actually was, probably because every mile carried a different kind of tension. I wasn't supposed to be going there. According to the CEO, I was meant to stay far away, pretend like none of this was happening, pretend the memo was the end of the conversation. But after the photo, after the anonymous warnings, after realizing how carefully someone had been blocking me, I knew I couldn't sit quietly at home and wait for everything to collapse. I had evidence, real evidence, and more importantly, I had questions that couldn't be ignored anymore. When I reached the entrance of the resort, the security team stopped my car immediately. One of the guards leaned toward the window and asked for my name. I told him, and he frowned as if something didn't match. Then, after a brief call on his radio, they waved me through. That alone made my pulse react. If my access had been removed at headquarters, how was I suddenly allowed in here? Someone was either expecting me, or someone had just overridden the CEO's orders. I parked outside the main lobby and stepped out into the crisp air. The building was beautiful, quiet, with long glass windows reflecting the trees around it. But the calmness didn't match the storm building inside my chest. As I walked in, I could hear distant voices coming from the conference room, board members, executives, all gathered for the retreat I had been told to avoid. My steps slowed as I approached the doors. My heart hammered, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. I pushed the door open, and every head in the room turned toward me. The CEO's expression shifted instantly from composed to shocked, even nervous. The other board members exchanged confused looks. I didn't wait for him to speak. I walked straight to the center of the room, pulling the printed photo from my bag and placing it on the table. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. The CEO's face went pale. One of the board members, Daniel, leaned forward and picked up the photo. His eyes widened as he recognized the competitor's executives. He looked at the CEO sharply, then at me. "What is this?"